I'm going to speak in English because I recognize some people in the audience that are not Greek speakers yet. So first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for putting this together, and the year after year. Like Andreas said, last year was a historic event because there was no electricity, and instead of just canceling it, we decided to meet here, and there were a lot of people. So I think that if we overcame last year's, then we're doing okay. So this panel is about publishing your research work, and if you work in research, then one of the evaluation criteria of how well you're doing is based on the publication of your work. So, of course, this has been traditional the case, and however, you know, in the future maybe this will change. But for the time being, there's a very high correlation on how well you're doing in your research, and how well you're publishing your work. There might be some people that are doing excellent work, but if they are not publishing their work, then it doesn't get out, and you don't get the full benefit, even though you're doing great work. So this is an important component, and some people have a lot of experience, and some people have less experience, and it could be a daunting task the first time you do it. You read the paper, and it seems like, you know, these people have been working on this forever. How am I going to be able to publish, first of all, do the work and then publish it, and go beyond what everybody else has done? So for a new researcher, this is a very scary idea of being able to come up with an idea and publish it, and without having, you know, going beyond what everybody else has done. So what I'm going to try to do in the time, and I'll try to finish in 20 minutes, so that to allow more time for questions, is to give you some ideas just based on my experience, as an author, as a researcher, as well as an associate editor for several journals, and also as an editor-in-chief of the IEEE Transactions on Neural Networks, which is now IEEE Transactions on Neural Networks and Learning Systems. So this presentation is based on another presentation that I gave at the invitation of the Cyprus section of the IEEE Cyprus section. That presentation was it was something like the art and joy of research, and that was a full presentation which covered different aspects, which you see here, some about how to do literature review, research methodology, presentations, proposals, and so on. But today, what I would like to do is talk about one specific aspect, which is journal publications, so research publications. And also I have one slide on ethics, professionalism, and volunteerism, because in my opinion, you cannot talk about publishing without talking about this. The two go together. If you can publish the best work, but if you're not ethical and professional, then you might not be going in the right direction. So I think they go together. So I'll try to talk a little bit about that. So the structure that I have is just some bullets, and I will talk about different aspects. So there is a lot going on before you start thinking about publishing your work. So you have to obtain the results. So that's a different So that's a different way of thinking. So you have to do the research, and you have to follow a certain procedure, and you have to be insistent and push for it for a long time, and then finally you have obtained something that you think, after working for a year or so, you have obtained something that you think is publishable. So publishable in a journal. So one of the things, then you start thinking, which journal do I want to publish it in, and that's also a very big issue. In general, you want to go after the, so nowadays there are so many journals and so many conferences, so you want to go after the very best journals and the very best conferences, and that's not always clear which one it is, but there's a lot of rankings of journals, and so the thing that you want to pay attention to is to publish where, if you think the work is good, you don't want to put it so you don't want to put it in a journal that nobody would look into. Okay, so if you think the work is good, you want to publish it somewhere where the experts in the field will see it. So depending on what you're working on, and depending on where your references are, the papers that you read in order to come up with that work, and depending where the best people in the field, in that field, are publishing, you want to go after that journal. So I think that's a kind of a rule of thumb. It's not saying this is the best journal, but you want to go where to publish where the best people are publishing. There's a big reward after that, because sometimes I have seen work that is very good, and it's in some obscure journal that nobody has seen, and it's very hard for people to find the work and to read it and then to refer to it, and then you get and for you to get the credit that you deserve. So that's one of the issues that you have to think about, which journal that you want to go after, and it's an important issue, and usually your advisor has an opinion about that. So a lot of times you don't have to worry about it very much, because you can talk about it and decide. Now the next thing is, how do you go about writing the papers? And I apologize a priori if I'm saying things that you already are very familiar with, but some people in the audience are new, some of them are postdocs, so they have a lot of experience, and I hope everybody can get something out of it. So the first thing is, you want to be able to state clearly the contributions of the paper. A lot of times I read papers, and it's not clear from reading the paper what is the contribution. So the reader or the reviewer, what the case might be, will have his or her own opinion on what is the contribution. And you might get lucky, and the reviewer might give you more than the contribution that you were hoping for, but chances are they will give you less. So unless you say what your contribution is, and usually that has to come up in the introduction somehow. So in the introduction, it's a good place to say, this is where the field is, this is what other people have done, and then this is what this work is about, and this is where your contribution fits. So you can actually say, you can come up with and say the contribution of this paper is A, B, C. Usually the contribution is not, you want to be able to reduce the contribution into one sentence. So it's not realistic to hope that you have 10 contributions. Usually the contribution is 1, 2, 3 things. And If it's more than that, try to cluster them together into 3 things, because if you start saying that you have this contribution and then this contribution and then this contribution, it's like a lawyer. If you look at a legal document, a lot of times you say, we did this and we did this and we did this. But, you know, in the academia, that doesn't sell, and a lot of times it will come against you, because it's like claiming that you solved everything, and you put a negative aspect to your paper right from the beginning. So try to find the essence of your contributions right from the beginning. And not only that, not only you write it down, but it also helps to always think about it at the back of your mind, what is the contribution? Because a lot of people write a paper and then they go off on a tangent that is not related to the contribution, and that's usually not good. You think, oh, this is an interesting thing, but if it's not in what you're saying is your contribution, or what you think is the contribution, it doesn't help. So one of the things that is very important is for you first to say, what is special about this work that I'm about to write down? So write it down in front of you, so you have it right there. My contributions is 1, 2, 3. You can write it in the paper. Also keep it in mind so that when you're writing the paper, always write things related to the contributions that you have, not on side tangents that are you write for 2 pages on something that is not related to your contribution. That's a problem. You confuse the reader, and it doesn't help. The other important thing is the literature review and citations. And that's a tricky thing. So a lot of the people, when they first get a paper, they look at the back to see who are the citations. So who you cite is important. And so that kind of defines what the paper is about. And it's very important to be able to give the idea that you know what's going on. So if you write a paper that is, it might be a great paper, and you have no citations, people start to get doubtful. They doubt that you know the literature. So you don't want the reader to doubt that you're on top of things. You want the reader and the reviewer, of course, that is the reviewer is the one that is going to either allow or cut your paper from going forward, to feel that you are in control. You know what's going on, and then of course you did something beyond that, but you will need to give the picture that you know what's out there, or otherwise they will not give you any benefit of the doubt. The first thing they will find in the paper is they're going to say, well, yeah, if he knew the literature, he would have. So you want the reviewer to give you the benefit of the doubt when something was not written very well. And one of the ways to do that is to have an extensive literature review with the right citations. You want to give some historical, you want to reference the first person that did some work, that's good. But don't stay with all the old citations. If you write a paper and you have 20 citations and they are all in the 50s and 60s, that's also a problem. So you want to cite the most recent work, because that shows that you know what's going on. So you want to give some historical perspective to your references, but don't stay with that. I think it's important to give the latest work that has been done in that area. For some people, the writing in English is not easy. And this is not only for foreign, all of us here, English is our second language. But even for people that English is their first language, sometimes it's very difficult for them to write technical English, because there's a difference between the way you talk and you explain things and the way you write technically, and also different from literature, from reading a literature book. In technical English, you have to be precise. You cannot be vague, because you have no chance. If I talk with Agathocles and I say something that I exaggerate, and he's going to say, you don't really mean that, and then I can correct it. On written, you cannot do that. So there's no way to correct if something is that was written down is. So you have to be precise. You have to say exactly what you want to say, and read it again and make sure this is what you want to say. Because if you're imprecise, then the reviewer will say, well, what is he trying to say here? And usually they will not give you the benefit if they don't believe the work is good. So the technical English is also the English language. Of course, you don't want to have grammatical mistakes. If you're not good in English, give it to someone. Buy someone a beer, and in exchange you get them to read your paper and correct, or a few beers if necessary. But don't send it in if it has grammatical mistakes. But it's not just the grammatical mistakes and the spelling mistakes. That's a given. But also the technical English. It has to be precise in what you're saying. And then the other thing is not only the language, also the mathematical notation. You want your notation to be clear. You don't want people to have to work very hard to understand what you're trying to say. So sometimes mathematics is difficult, but if you use a good mathematical notation, that's going to help a lot. And then the other thing that helps a lot are the graphs. And these graphs could be like MATLAB graphs, based on results, but also diagrams. Diagrams are very important. So if you have a good diagram, then you can capture the audience in a big way. People like diagrams. You can write a lot of things. People will skip them, but if they see a diagram, they're going to try to understand. And if in the diagram you have 1,000 arrows going in different directions and 1,000 boxes, then they're going to get frustrated. They're going to try to understand it, they're going to get frustrated, and it's going to come against you. So sometimes precise statement, that's also very important. So you're writing things down, and you're not sure what you want to say, and you go ahead and say it anyway, and hope that it's going to come out. And a lot of times it doesn't come out, and so you say, okay, if I am a bit vague, then people will not know what I'm trying to say, but that's okay. It's okay to be a bit vague. But I think it's very important to first ask yourself, so when you're trying to say something and it doesn't come out, ask yourself, what am I trying to say? So first answer your question, and that's usually a very important thing. And the other thing is to be technically sound. So again, to be able to be precise what you're trying to say, and you have some results. So you have a theoretical. So you have a theory or some simulations, usually, or some experimental work. So all the results are usually in these three categories. You either have something theoretical, you have some simulations that illustrate some things, or you have some experimental work that says something. or sometimes it's a combination of these three. Then you write your theorem down, and a lot of times people just end the theorem with the proof, and then they go on to the next theorem or to the next result without actually trying to interpret the result. So you want to write, maybe it's just one paragraph to say what you think is the importance of that result. I think that's very important. Now, this slide is a little bit about more the overall picture of how you go about publishing your work. I think there's two ways to do it. You can actually start. You did all the work, so you have all your results there, sitting there in handwritten notes, or maybe you have them from presentations, and you want to put them together. So one of the things that a lot of times people do is just to start writing based on what they have there without thinking before where they are going with this. I think it's very important to think about the flow of the paper. So the paper is like a story that you have to tell people. So just like any other good story, you want to have a flow. You want one paragraph to follow another paragraph in a logical way. So you don't want to be jumping from one thing to another and then to another. So in order to achieve this story, you have to build it beforehand. So you can first of all, you can think about the structure of the paper. Let's say I'm going to start with the introduction. Usually the structure is not too. It's pretty normal. So you start with introduction. You can have a mathematical, depending on which area you're working on. You can have a mathematical formulation of the problem, and then you have your results and you have your simulations at the end. However, in each one of these, you want to think what is going to go, what am I going to put in there, and think of your paper like a story that you tell somebody. So the story has to be something that people want to listen to, because you don't want people to get bored with what you have to say. So you want to make it interesting. So the same with a paper. And I know that it's very difficult, but all the time you should try to put yourself in the position of the reviewer or the reader. So you have read many papers. Hopefully you don't start to write a paper without having ever read a paper before. So you read a lot of papers. You know what you think about papers. So it's kind of important to even though you're the author and you're very biased, that's by definition, it's important to be able to switch roles, switch hats, and say, if I was the reader, what would I think of this? I know it's very difficult. Sometimes it helps just to put the paper aside for 3 days, a week, the longer the better, so that you forget that you're the author, and read it like a reader. And that's going to tell you a lot about what's... because at the end of the day, it's your work, but it has to be read by people and appreciated. So it's important not to get too close to your work. Let other people judge it, how good it is. So one time I was at it was an awards ceremony, and they were awarding somebody named Jury. He's pretty well known in the controls community and also in other fields. And he was, I don't know, that was a long time ago, but at that time he was, I don't know, 70, 75 years old. And then he, after the award ceremony, he gave a small talk. And one of the things that stuck with me is what he said. He was giving advice to young Ph.D. students, and based on his experience, so he was 75 years old, he accomplished a lot. And he was saying that one of the things he learned in his work is that is not to get too close to your research and let the community decide how good it is. Because a lot of times he said he submitted papers that he thought were great and nobody paid any attention to them. And then sometimes he wrote papers that thought, you know, it was okay, but not something great, and the community really liked that, and it generated other work, and so a lot of times when it's your own work, even though you think you know how good it is, a lot of times you're not the best judge. So even though it's hard, it's important to be able to let go and let other people judge your work. The other thing is that the beginning of the paper is very important. I'm not a psychologist, but I would claim that most times the reviewer has a negative or a positive trend after reading the introduction, okay, without actually reading the paper. It's just human nature. You read, you have, of course, after that you can change your mind, but you want your reviewer after the introduction to be to have a positive attitude towards your paper. If he does or if she does, then it's going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and even if something is not exactly right, it's going to ask you to revise it and fix it. But if the reviewer is thinking negatively, they're going to try to find something to reject the paper. So the first 3 or 4 pages of the paper are very important. So you want to make sure that you get it right. In journal papers, hardly any paper gets accepted for publication the first time you submit it. Very, very few. If that happens, you're very lucky. Most of the papers that eventually get published, the first time they get a rating of revise and resubmit. So when you submit, you're doing great work. You submit your paper, you expect people to come back and say, this is the best science that happened in the last 20 years. And instead of that, you get revise and resubmit. You get very disappointed. Usually it's not even revise and resubmit. Now it's called reject and resubmit. It's the same thing, but it's just a different category on manuscript censorship. It's the same thing. So you get very disappointed. So usually a lot of people take 3 months to recover and to actually do anything with the paper. You should not do that. So you should. So if you get a revise and resubmit, there's a very good chance that if you do the revision and you address the comments in a satisfactory manner doesn't mean that if you have 10 comments and you have to address everything exactly. But if you do most of the work, then the paper will be eventually get accepted. There's again the psychology. If I'm a reviewer and I ask you to do 5 things and you spend a lot of time working on the revision and you came back and you did everything you could, or at least then there's a human psychology that I'm going to say, okay, it's fine. I'll accept it. So you should not get discouraged with this revise and resubmit. You should try to address the issues. If something is not, you disagree, you can disagree, but you don't want to get into a big argument and try to prove your objective should be to pass the paper, not to make the reviewer be a fool. You know, you don't. Maybe you'll achieve in making the reviewer be a fool, but you don't even know who the reviewer is, and it's not going to help you in any way. And the reviewer is always the one that has the upper hand. She's the one that is going to say yes or no. So it doesn't help. So you can disagree, but so the things that you want to address, especially in a revise and resubmit, is if there are certain issues that make the paper better and also address the reviewer's comments, you should definitely do that. If you know, it doesn't require writing a new paper. I mean, it's so because in that way you improve the paper and you satisfy the reviewers. You know, it's like getting two birds with one stone, and that's a good situation to be. So you want to be able to do that, and so I think it's a very important aspect of publishing. A lot of good papers are not being published because people just get so discouraged and they stop working on it. Journals and conference papers. There's a lot of people that have a lot of experience at writing conference papers. They are very successful, and then so they end up having 10 conference papers and no journal papers, and they say, yeah, sure, I could do it, but I prefer conference papers. The truth of the matter is that journal papers have a different recognition in the community, in all the communities. Computer engineering is one of the areas where conference papers are also very important. However, in general, people appreciate journal papers, and journal papers are important because a lot of times they allow you to go in more depth. So I think even if you're very good at conference papers, it's a different mentality to be able to publish good journal papers, and you should follow that. And last, one slide about ethics and professionalism and volunteerism. One of the things that is becoming a very big issue in research is issues related to ethics. And I think you should be aware of that. It's very important as a researcher, to be ethical and to request the same ethics from everybody around you. So I think this is very important. So there's cases of plagiarism arising all the time, and plagiarism it's in many different forms, and so there's self-plagiarism, there's copying from other people, which of course is more serious, but even copying from your own work without referring to it is also very serious, which is it's very important to avoid that. And also to make sure the community around you is aware of that. Now, how do you avoid that? First of all, if two people sit independently and write a paper, even if they solve the same problem, there's a very, very, very high probability that the two papers would be different. So for two papers to look exactly the same, that means one or the other has been influenced, and people recognize that. So you want to make sure that if you read somebody's work and has affected your way of thinking, that you refer to that work, even if it's your own work. Okay? So a lot of times people say, you know, this is a conference paper that I did, and I'm now expanding it into a journal paper, but they send it to the journal paper and they say, but this is the same as a conference paper. It's okay for the paper to be rejected, but not to be rejected for a plagiarism case. So you want to say up front that this is an extension of this work that we did and refer to it, even if it's not published yet, if it's submitted. You always want to say that. You don't want the reviewer to find it. The other thing that is very important are there software nowadays that find everything related to plagiarism. So maybe you don't know that, but when you submit your paper to a conference or to a journal, I know that it's the case for the IEEE, your paper, it gets matched to everything that has been published ever before. Everything on the internet. It's not just journals and papers, it's also Ph.D. thesis. Because they have agents, they search on the internet, they find everything. And then the associate editor or the editor-in-chief has in front of them your paper and then everything that matches that. Some of them is okay, you know, the references are for sure being published somewhere else. But if you have a whole text, so the software tells them exactly where it has been published before. And so, of course, it's not just how much matching there is, it's also what is the content of the content. So it's not only unethical, but it's also stupid to do it, because eventually, even if it's not caught right now, is eventually people will find that out, because once you publish something, it stays there forever, and then everything that has been published before is also staying there forever. And so the software programs that are going to be doing this matching are going to be getting better and better. So eventually, paper, and you don't want to be ethical about that. And also, if you publish, you also have to be able to review papers yourself. So this is how the system works. So you submit a paper, other people review it, you also have to review it. You have to be professional in the way you review papers. And that might not affect your own publications, but in the long term, it's very important to be a professional, to be a researcher that people can rely on. And believe me, in the long term, this work, is eventually going to pay off if you don't think, okay, I'm just too busy to. I'm not saying that to spend all your time reviewing papers, but you have to do your share, or otherwise the system doesn't work. If you only write papers and not review, if everybody did that, the system would just collapse. So it's important to be aware of that and to be professional in the way you do it.